Hello, everybody, and welcome to the next episode and the podcast of the Lowdown on Low Code. We have a great guest with us today who has a lot of experience in the industry and on the topics we cover and are passionate about: low code, automation, RPA, and all the things that come with that. And you know, we've been doing this. I forget how many podcasts we've done now, but it's a lot. We have great leaders, we have great vendors, we have clients, and listening to them tell their story, so that this isn't just an analyst giving their point of view of what they think the market is doing, but actually real life stories on how people got here and where they're going. I think makes it really, really exciting. So if this is your first episode of listening to us, definitely go back and listen to the others, because there's a lot of great information in there in leadership. So I'm Francis Carden. I was one of the founders of an RPA company known as OpenSpan, and went on to sell that to Pegasystems, and very much got into the entrenches of everything to do with low code, which is my number one passion, probably behind RPA. I've been doing that for many, many decades. And so I'm going to introduce my cohort in this episode, and from analysis.tech that runs these podcasts, Mr. John Rymer himself. John.
Thank you, Francis. Great to be here. Everyone, thanks for joining. Thanks for joining the conversation, for listening in. As Francis said, we have a regular stream of these podcasts. And if you like what you're hearing, push the like button, push the share button, tell your friends. As Francis said, we're very excited. We've had a number of real practitioners on the podcast, and we're fortunate today to be able to have a gentleman named Stevie Sims, who I first heard about when I read a book about citizen development called All Hands on Tech. And lo and behold, the two authors of that book, Ian Barkin and Tom Davenport. Ian's been on the podcast, by the way.
Gotta love Ian.
The two authors found Stevie Sims, who illustrated their point that companies have just an incredible wealth and of knowledge and experience that they can unleash if they sanction them and help them apply automation, apply digitization to business processes. And there was Stevie. You were one of the stars of the book, Stevie. So we're really excited to have you here.
Excited to be here for sure.
Yeah, welcome. So, Stevie, we start our podcasts by asking our guests to tell us their origin story. How did you start on this journey of yours, where you are automating processes and tasks and really important things? By the way, I should mention, I forgot to mention that you work for a large energy company. So here you are digitizing processes and functions in a highly regulated industry, no less. Tell us how you got started on that, Stevie.
Yeah, for sure. I spent most of my career in the field in operations and downstream manufacturing, chemicals and products plants. For the most part of my career was definitely in the field, climbing towers, turning valves, operating the asset, nights, weekends, holidays. Started to kind of get introduced to data from some, local activities I was doing. And then around 2018, I was asked, they were looking for volunteers to be part of a turnaround execution planning organization from an operations perspective, right? And so when I got there, I can remember vividly, the first time I had opened a spreadsheet and had to do a save as, right? And this is literally like late 2018. So starting with how to make all the rows the same height and, the very, very basics. But early on, I was introduced to just tons of data, right? And you can imagine a large turnaround event with thousands of jobs. There's thousands of metadata properties about each of those jobs. And so I was tasked with, updating many spreadsheets. And that was really like the very, very early start of my digitalization journey. started to understand a little bit more about Excel. I can remember being asked to participate in help out one of the meetings that happens twice a day during a turnaround event. And it was just, tons of data. And I started to, think about ways that I could use Excel to, eliminate or make this problem most efficient. Right. So built my very first Excel tool. I started to really get into conditional formatting and very, very basics of Excel, but I can remember the tool itself was eliminating face-to-face meeting with several people twice a day, and that was some success and some inspiration to keep going. And I can remember vividly standing in a turnaround tent in July of 2019, hot as can be, literally two screens, copy and pasting data so that my spreadsheet, which was the Ready Not Ready tool, could operate once a day and eliminate all these meetings. And I had a coworker walk up and just kind of ask out of curiosity what I was doing. I was starting to highlight the success of the little tool I was building, and he's like, "Man, are you crazy? Have you ever seen VLOOKUP? You ever heard of VLOOKUP?" And I tell that story often, but it truly was a major inflection point on my journey. From there, I went home and just committed all the extra time that I had to learning how to become more efficient with data, become more proficient with tools like Excel. And if I fast forward a little bit on the timeline, around August of 2021, uh, kind of just, a couple years into this Excel data journey, I got a call from a friend. I was asking him, how do I look at, accelerating my Excel journey and getting better at dashboarding and, visual reports in Excel. And he said, "Steve, we're working on this COVID-19 response force dashboard in Power BI. Like, you really need to learn this." I stopped what I was doing, got on Google at the time, got on YouTube, started learning everything I could. Um, Fast forward 3 weeks later, August 29th, 2021, Hurricane Ida hit the US Gulf Coast. I was,
It's live, ladies and gentlemen.
I was getting a call just like that, right? And so got a call, as funny as that is. I was already evacuated with my family. Got a call that we needed some data and digital help back at the site. Came home and in 4 days built the IDA recovery dashboard, which sat as a tool and mechanism to visually show the statuses of thousands of jobs for that effort. Um, from there, started building apps and automations. Never went back to operations. Just went on a 3 or 4 year journey of building every possible app automation to solve any possible business problem, and very much from a citizen developer perspective, right? At the time, I was building tools, whether it be application interfaces to use in the field, automating workflows, approvals for my own organization. And then that gradually led to a path where I started to build apps and automations for other organizations, right? And so I started to, move to this gray area in the middle where I'm no longer a citizen developer per se if I'm building for all other organizations, but I'm using the same low code, no code platform stack of tools. And so that's really how I got started.
Great.
Most
That's awesome.
most of the time I tell
Hey,
people it's by happenstance, right? And just, trying to figure out a way to solve a problem.
yeah,
And just,
I like
it's
move on to the
it's
next problem.
it, it's cool that we've had a number. You're quite well known in the Power Platform community, and we've had a number of other folks who are very well known on. And it's amazing how all of you kind of, you just keep learning, you just keep pushing, and it's, YouTube and community support, and just keep pushing. Listen, I have one question for you, because we don't work in energy companies, and I expect a lot of people who are listening don't work in energy company. What is a turnaround event?
Yeah, for sure. It's a large scale project that's typically planned about 2 years prior to execution. And by planning, we look at all the jobs that have to be executed, and then we look at all the information that has to be captured, collected, planned. organized to safely and effectively execute that plan, maintenance for sometimes thousands of pieces of equipment in about the most limited time frame that we could possibly do, because we always have the goal to do it safe, but then to do it efficiently and get back on spec and get the unit operational again. So if you could just relate that to tons of data, tons of past
Big
historical
project
data,
stuff. Big
big
project.
project
Yep.
stuff. So project management skills, planning, resource allocation, schedule optimization, um, in a world of tons of spreadsheets and manual
Mhm.
collection of data and then manual transformation of data. You can see where the low code platform really kind of was able to
Right.
accelerate some of the efficiencies there around the 2019 and early 21, 22 days for me.
So,
Great. Thank you.
Stevie, listen. One of the things that we try to flush out, right, is the kind of project. So, your story actually, this is. I don't know what your future journey is, but mine started when I was 17, doing very similar things, and led me accelerated path through automation. This is when things really were manual with floppy disks and big fat desktop computers. And those automations were predominantly moving data from mainframes into Lotus 123, you may have heard of, which was the DOS version of a spreadsheet before Excel. And it not only brought down the data, but it shifted the column widths and selected the data views and drew the graph, something a mainframe couldn't do easily, but I could do as a quote unquote citizen developer, although we'd use any of these terms back then. We were just an optimizer, right? In fact, we were just, and that led me to my entrepreneurial journey, because that said, look, I'm not going to be paid by somebody else to do this. I'm going to go build a company. I think there's a product to be built here. And that was really the birth of automation and RPA and all the things that came with automating as is through the screen. Through, screen scraping was the term. I mean, the glass, automation through the glass. It was the swivel chair syndrome, which is the manual effort of moving data. And surprisingly, you're leaping ahead 30 years and still working for a company that's still doing those very same things. It might not be DOS and floppy disks, but you're still using spreadsheets manually and navigating systems and reports. And to be honest, we should just be ashamed. But I think we're entering a brand new era where the acceleration and the elimination of these as is things that we're using automation tools on are actually accelerating a way to not need them, but giving us the ability to reimagine the processes themselves in a way, and if I was young enough, it would be my next entrepreneurial business, I think, but it actually move us away from this stuff. So the question for you is, what are the kind of things we get that you're automating operational as is things, but are you also as an organization looking at what's going on with, truly legacy modernization and some of those model application platforms where for decades we said, well, we're stuck with this application. We just need to automate it, make it better. And are you moving into that era of, what if we didn't have this application today at all? How would we do it? So where do you sit? Somewhere in the middle, on the left or the right?
Uh, I don't know which side was which, but to be honest, I mean, like,
Not
yeah, it's a
political,
large
left or right, I'm
company.
sure.
Yeah, large company. I read an article the other day by a person who wrote the concept of uh, what was it? Forward development engineer, right? And I kind of read that and really, took a liking to what she said there. And it's like, I sit really close to the business because I'm from the business, right? I'm from the field, I'm from the asset. I understand the ins and outs and the relationship data from a domain perspective, right? So I I don't as much sit at the very high overarching level where we're looking at all of these different applications in the landscape. I've always been a little bit closer to the real, field asset integration of data and integration of technology with the people, at the very core of it. Um, and so from that perspective, maybe, from a lens of, solving the next business problem or the problem that caused the most grief or the problem that could possibly bring the most value, and then going and rinse and repeating and doing that over and over again versus, looking at a larger perspective of the entire application landscape. And I think there is a lot of that going on, a lot of valuable work going on there, but not as much of it from my personal perspective or my personal experience of the last 4 or 5 years.
Well, so
Okay.
a recommendation would be as you insert yourself into that other side, because what we're seeing the movement is that, and I mean, people who used to write the applications sitting alongside a developer were just called domain experts. Someone came out of insurance or in finance who didn't have a clue what a computer was. Somebody who was a computer programmer didn't have a clue what finance or banking or anything was. They sat together and built this. So I think this is the next gen. So I would recommend you, as you move more and more into that side, you bring these great expertise in what the business needs to get done, but not necessarily be so constrained by what was. And this becomes that whole IT and business fight. But I think the fight's done. I think it'd be a great move for you to keep pushing that team and getting into that team. John.
How many applications do you think you've built, um, Stevie?
Uh,
Hundreds?
Less than 100, more than 75. When you look at, and if you break it down to the business had a problem and that problem was solved with a tool or technology, and that tool or technology included an app, an automated workflow, or a visual analytics tool. And now sometimes we kind of combine those things into a solution and to say that like we built an app that also had automated workflows, and so that would count as one. But I kind of always think of it as myself being a problem solver, and with the low code suite of tools, I've solved over 75 problems.
That's
Um,
awesome. I think that's a great way to think about it, Stevie, is
Mhm. Mm,
using technology to solve business problems. You
that's
do
it.
not have a technical background. A computer background. You came out of the field, as you say, and you've obviously really dedicated yourself to learning, and you're continuing to do that. For those who like you would love to be able to use technology to solve the business problems they see in their day to day. What were the really key assets, the key things? You mentioned YouTube. I mean, what were the key resources, friends, courses, whatever, that really helped you really launch this journey and continue it going? I mean, where's the great information that makes you smarter and makes you better at these projects?
Yeah, I would say like the landscape has changed drastically in the last 5 years, right? The way we consume information today, the way we share information, and the way we problem solve is drastically different. So in the early days of, way back in 2019, there was a lot of forums and blog posts and, manually scraping Google to find articles that had relative information and then troubleshooting, right? Um, there was, YouTube videos and, definitely have some YouTube heroes out there from the landscape. Locally within the company, we had a community of excellence kind of starting in that journey. And so we did have local coaches and people to kind of lean on as mentors that were also kind of in their own way getting into the platform and understanding not only how to proceed, but how to proceed and follow the governance and rules from within the company, which is also very important and also not found on Google and YouTube. Um,
Mhm.
Today's landscape's drastically different, right? All of the information typically is at your fingertips in a more efficient, faster, and often in a more resourceful way, right? So as a human going through blog posts or Slack posts and looking for, thumbs up on the answer that was best, that kind of is eliminated today. Um, but the process and methodology is still the same, right? Like becoming a creature of efficiency and how you consume, process data to solve business problems. The tooling has only accelerated that for me, but I think the process is still the same, right? If I'm stuck, If I need to troubleshoot a problem, if I need to, resolve an issue where I'm just lost on an idea on how to get from A to Z, the tooling and technology is definitely there and makes things most efficient. But yeah, no computer background. I did go to college for about 8 years to get a 2-year degree, and then tried to go back for another 2 years, and then kind of just woke up one day, or after a nap on a weekend, and really thought about what I was doing there. And it's, I'm at some point chasing a 4-year college degree, or can I educate myself and really spend focused time, really honing my craft, and thinking about how I can accelerate my skills in the current landscape of things, and how I could utilize my time to learn as much as I can to be as effective as I could for my, for my own personal company. And then, so yeah, no technical computer background, no, you know, base knowledge of coding or, data foundations, so everything I've learned has been from YouTube or Google, or now, with the accelerated pace of learning that's available through large language models, and the whole
No
landscape
tech,
that's there now in this space.
n- no technical background, no problem. I mean,
No.
you just can figure it out. Hey,
Yeah, and I
quick
think
commercial break.
maybe maybe one last point to that is, like,
Yeah, go
maybe
for it.
that is really what's that?
No, go
Oh
for
yeah,
it.
yeah. I
Sorry.
would just say, like, that is maybe the heart of low code, right? It's that we continue to move people with domain expertise closer to problem solving and closer to the technology. And then, um, you know, not to discredit the people that do have the very vast, broad technical backgrounds there, but in today's landscape, I think you're starting to see that the domain expertise is really a favorable skill, and really can, leverage the technology to really accelerate problem solving for businesses across,
We agree with that.
organizations and
That's a
lines of
great
business,
point.
for sure.
That's
We
that's
agree with
just
that.
a that's a great point. Quick commercial break, folks. You are listening or watching, if you're watching, Lowdown on Low Code, a mostly weekly podcast series brought to you by your friends at analysis.tech. I'm John Rymer, one of the founders, one of the partners at Analysis.tech. Francis Carden is another of our partners. Rob Koplowitz, uh, big big expert on digital process automation. Dave Marcus, who's done a lot of work on digital process automation and product strategy and business strategy. Rick Greenwald, our data guy, um, has worked for years and years in understanding data architectures, data products, etc. You can find us, engage with us at analysis.tech. Check out our research page. It's all free. It's just available for the cost of your email address. And with that, commercial over. And Francis, let's get back to our discussion with Stevie.
You you should have added, John, that, like, so John is, and Rob, ex Forrester, and Rick is Gartner, and Dave Marcus is the UiPath guru. He spent 7 years there. Me at OpenSpan, RPA, Godfather, as John likes to say, and also 7-8 years with Pega. So Stevie, you mentioned a couple of things that are quite interesting. Again, it really aligns with what I was saying, the domain expertise. I wrote an article about the domain expertise is actually the future citizen developer, because if we lose the domain expertise, we've lost it all. We just got developers. Well, they're going to sit around and whistle Dixie. They don't know what to do, right? Then typically not understanding what the business requirements are. And God help us if that actually happens. And a lot of these legacy systems contain within them all that legacy debt, and nobody even knows what it does. I mean, they're bringing AI out now to try to unravel legacy code and try to figure it out, but really it should have been documented. But nobody, developers don't like to document, and business like to over document. And so it just becomes this kind of like this fruitfulness endeavor of constantly optimizing. But it always scares me just how bad our legacy debt is and the total cost of ownership of all this stuff. And so, and the other thing you mentioned about where you came from, no technical background. And I like your college thing. I left school at 15. I couldn't be taught. I had to self-teach. I would be doing benchmarks on systems to performance tests through midnight to 5 a.m. The only time we could get time on our computers. I loved it, and it allowed me to grow very, very quickly and start my first business when I was 25, 26. I don't need an accolade for that. But what I'm saying is it agrees that you need a mix. You need the people that have got the educational background. You need the people that are just so passionate about trying to optimize and make things better. And then you need the techies who provide the governance and security and have our back. And I think as we see this come together, it's really exciting. And so that leads into what three pieces of advice would you give to someone coming into the workforce today who's they've come in maybe with an educational background, or maybe you've given them a chance that they've come from a difficult background and but they have an entrepreneurial spirit, but to bring that into an organization like yourself to encourage real fruitfulness, innovation, because you have competitors. Your market dictates how you can spend and evolve, and governments can control what you can and can't do sometimes. So what's the next thing? What is the advice you as Stevie would give to the next generation coming behind you? Although you're a very young man compared to John and I.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, for me, I'm very, vocal on the landscape is going to continuously require a lot of personas, right? And so, like, I'm very much an evangelist for low code and citizen development in general, right? Be it application automation, and even now in citizen AI. Um, and that doesn't mean that all of the problem solving will be done in the future by pure domain knowledge expertise that have some tech knowledge that can just go and use low code tools. I think there's going to be this continuous fusion of many different personas in the landscape. Um,
A fusion
I
team.
would
That's
say
what it's
that
called, right?
to answer the question, it depends on where you are and where you're coming in, your entry point, right? Like for somebody with business domain knowledge that wants to get involved with accelerating problem solving with tech and technology, I would always say that having some core data foundational knowledge, some data fluency, some data literacy, understanding how tables are related and how data is related. That is something that is often overlooked when we jump on YouTube and start to, create a Canvas app for some information form that we want to, automate or bring into the digital landscape. And so that part of it definitely maybe gets overlooked, and maybe even in my own personal journey, if I would have spent a little more time on that early on, I wouldn't be sitting at 75 apps. I'd be, over at 200, right? If you're on the technical side, trying to understand how do you get more rounded in problem solving for the business, uh, I would say, start to understand how to communicate with people and irrespective of meeting them where they're at, right? So it is difficult for a business person to speak in terms of technology, and you can imagine that the opposite is true as well, right?
Mhm.
But if we, learn how to better communicate what the business problems are, and learn how to listen to what those are, and learn how to really understand and ingest, um, how do we really communicate what is inefficient, what are the pain points, and often I think from a technology side we want to look first at the tooling, and we really miss that, right? We want to maybe think about problem solving from the problem first and the people first versus the tooling and technology first perspective. And I think that's where a lot of enterprises really missing out right now. When you think of the Gardner research that's been recently published, right, that 95% of AI enterprises returning $0 or less on investment. Um, and I know a lot of in the 5% that are, and perhaps maybe that's the reason for failure is this this fear of missing out approach of how can we use AI to solve business problems? Well, really, from a technology's perspective and from a business domains perspective, I think it really comes back to the root of problem solving from the core of the problem. And So that's kind of where I would go with that, right? If you're new to the technology side, definitely get some background knowledge on data and data relationships, and think of things from that perspective because it will accelerate the journey. And if you're from the technical side, understand the business problems and the process and the people and the culture is definitely something that'll definitely help accelerate, from a journey coming from that angle.
Well, the industry has written about business and IT misalignment for absolutely decades, and I still think that exists. But I think encouraging technologists to get their hands dirty and encouraging innovators, and the mutual respect for each other, but then get in the dirt and just go build and try something. But be absolutely aware that you're not building anything that's going to go live because we've seen too much risk. And the problem right now, and I think the AI failure is becoming you're trying to apply AI to something you don't know how it works now. There's a lot of the stuff under the covers that we automate. There's just the risk is too high. And some people go, well, no one can say 100% guarantee this is going to work. And there's no risk with, putting RAG out or data infractions or updating systems. That's why that's there. But when we all come together and start reimagining these things. And so my encouragement for bringing people in this industry, get your hands dirty, but don't just believe it's suddenly going to go live. You don't have to be working day in, day out on go live. You need to be working day in all your spare time on experimenting and playing in the dirt. That would be my advice. Anyway, John, over to you, mate.
Well, you mentioned AI, and
Did I?
we
Never.
you both mentioned AI. Obviously, there's a tremendous amount of attention that's being paid to very rapidly evolving AI technologies and how they can help us solve business problems. How do you see it, Stevie? How do you see AI helping you, continue on your journey and continue to create solutions?
Yeah, I think as being a part of the November 2022 uh, moment that happened in history there, where the public facing integration of large language models became a thing, right? With OpenAI. I can remember just being super curious and asking it questions and getting, instant feedback, not really understanding what was going on, but kind of understanding, how the models were trained and, what it was doing to, provide that data back to me. So was very early and curious in that perspective. And then, always treated the tool and the technology as an assistant to help with the problem solving and not a replacement for it.
Hmm.
So throughout my journey, then going forward, it was, if I am, in early days, troubleshooting an issue or an error or trying to figure out a formula, it was an accelerator for that. Um, and so I've always saw it as this, quote unquote cliche co-pilot for me. Um, and that's definitely changed in the present, right? And today I do take more of a start with the technology first to help accelerate the planning, to help accelerate the steps that I'm going to take as I look to create my data model. Um, it could even be brainstorming. How am I going to go about, ingesting this new information about a problem that I have to solve, right? And so we're, definitely seeing a change in the way we approach problem solving from a low code perspective that is greatly enhanced by the use of some of the capabilities and the tools. I will also say that, I am often, exploring what the next step looks like, right? And, a lot of news at the time of this recording, we're on day 2 of the Ignite conference from Microsoft. And I'm not sure if we're there yet where we can just purely, communicate via natural language and have apps and automations built for us, right? But the path to that is, kind of starting to show itself. And if in the very early days for me, it took me 4 weeks to build an app, at some point, maybe 2 years ago, with AI assistance, I was able to to go from 4 weeks to 4 days. Um, Yesterday, as an experiment, I had a real business idea. Went on to my personal tenant and built a fully functioning app with Dataverse backend in 4 minutes. Um,
Mm,
don't know if we'll continue to exponentially cut the time or how efficient we'll be with utilizing technology like that for more advanced problems that we have to solve. But I will say that for surely that's really the thing that for people to think about, right? Think about the tooling as a personal productivity enhancer of bridging the gap of knowledge that's there or troubleshooting or for a lot of my applications now I will use it to actually produce and write the HTML for me, right? If I'm using something like that for an app interface, and totally removes the writer's block there often, allows me to focus more on the brainstorming and pure ideation side and less on the technical manual typing side. So um,
right.
yeah, a lot there to really unpack. We could go on for hours. Um,
Right.
but I do see it as like, with an open-minded perspective, right? Learn how to utilize the tooling and technology to make what you're doing most efficient. Don't think that you're going to use a shovel to eat a bowl of ice cream. And that's where I think a lot of people are failing, right? They're looking at the tooling and technology first and saying, how can we use AI to solve our business problems?
Right.
That's
Right.
I like that
not really
analogy.
the best perspective of how maybe you should approach things.
Is there anything that scares you? A lot of people are afraid of generative AI. Anything scares you about it?
I'll tell you one thing that does bring some fear, right? And I will say that early on in many enterprise organizations, we are moving in a space where we're allowing people to utilize AI to create documents, right? Create PowerPoints, do meeting summarization, make Word documents. And so I do see a space, if we're not careful, where these documents are then stored in a document library, and then somebody a little bit more advanced comes into the landscape and wants to build an agent to go reference and get inference from those documents. And then you can see where this is going, right? We're continuously maybe producing hallucinated data,
Hallucinated
documentation that is going to be,
hallucinations.
yeah. And so, yeah, without, forgive my language here, but yeah, it becomes a cycle of total bot shit. Uh,
We can beep it out. Don't worry.
realistically, right? And I've seen it with my own two eyes where I ask a question that I already know, and the agent is inferencing a document that I know was created by a person that didn't know what they were talking about.
Mhm.
But it was pretty and it was formatted in a nice fashion. And at that point, right, do we start to make decisions based on what the agent is telling us, even if the agent is grounded in data that was produced from another large language model in 2022?
Yeah.
So definitely have to be careful for that and proceed with caution. And I think there's some things that we could do and some things from the tooling and technology that can help. Um, but that is one thing that I kind of semi fear, right? That we'll continuously not to say become lazy from the enablement of the tooling and technology, but that we'll start to lose our ability to really problem solve from a problem
Yeah.
solving mental perspective.
I mean, I think what you're describing is the corpus of information that these models are acting on degrades because it's based on hallucinations or it's based on a lot of the documents that are created. You're seeing this. You're seeing teachers report on this with high school students relying on
Mhm.
relying on it on Chat GPT to for their term papers. They're really kind of mush. There's no insight. It's all bland. There's nothing to it. So the corpus is degraded by stuff like that.
Well,
Anyway,
I think
thanks
it
for that.
also,
That's great. Francis,
yeah,
over
that
to
is.
you.
Yeah, so we're going to wrap up with some final thoughts in a moment. A couple of final questions for fast-paced answers, and but I think on that take is interesting because, to be honest, we should have always feared humans making errors. There are many companies that said, "Well, we don't make mistakes, so the customer's got the problem. It's not ours." Right? I mean, we've lived that for generations before
And
computing.
I sensed that that was coming because it always comes. You would just now, agree that the accelerated pace for creating nonsense is exponentially
Yeah, it's an
there.
accelerated nonsense pace. I mean, I get an answer from ChatGPT, and sometimes I have to get it to verify itself 3 times using 3 different methods, not including the one it used the first time, and it still gives me 3 different answers. So we have to use our brains on it. But I do think this is where it leads me to my last final thought question. Working with IT, we talked about business and IT alignment. I think IT and governance is the crucial element here, which is probably why we see more failures in business trying to use AI, because that's God help us, because that's very dangerous, as opposed to it truly being implemented, properly governed, just like an IT system, just like everything else. And that bubbles up then where tools are provided to the citizen developer like yourselves, where you can then use those things that have been governed and so forth. So that's the question. How do you work with IT pros at your company? Do you find that it's a them and us, or do you find there's resistance? How do you overcome that resistance? Sorry, I said a quick answer, but yeah, just simply,
No,
how
yeah,
do you
yeah, for
work
sure.
today with the IT people of your organization?
And technically, I am an IT professional in an IT organization. So
Oh,
I'm a little bit, like you said, like kind of closer to the middle for sure. Um, I think the more we can work together, the better off we'll be. And I think the understanding of, like our brains, we can only think on a linear scale, right? We can only document, govern, and move at a pace at which we're accustomed to, whereas the technology is continuously exponentially getting faster, right?
Mhm.
And so, as large organizations that have to prepare and continuously rewrite the manuals and change the logos and change the titling of these things, and then it people on both sides of the frustration have to understand it, right? If you think in that your company isn't moving fast enough, how could you expect them to, right? The landscape of technology is exponentially moving at a pace at which we've seen it will continue to speed up. But as organizations understand how to define the governance and the structure and the organization and the rules and things to keep the data and securities and things in place and
And I think
protected,
that's
you
more
can
critical
understand
than
that
ever.
there's no way we could ever meet the same pace.
No, and it's
So I
more
think it's just
critical than ever. Sure. Sorry, Steve.
what's that?
No, I said this is what you've just articulated is more critical than ever, because these things becoming out of our control. If IT and business are not aligned, it's gonna end up at the very least failing, the very worst generating huge amount of risk for these enterprises. So, John, you have a last question, I think.
yes. Well, Stevie, first, thank you for joining us on the podcast. It's been a great pleasure getting to know you, and thank you for sharing your experiences. I mean, it really helps people. It really
It does.
and it inspires them as well. I'd to say congratulations on your journey, and you've had such great success. What do you do for an encore, man? We're in capitalism here. What do you do for an
He's going to start
encore?
his own business.
Man, honestly, I think what brings me most joy is helping other people and giving back. And like anything I can do to come and participate in things like this, to kind of share my journey, to help inspire others. That's really my main motivation there. I do like problem solving. I do enjoy working with people. I do enjoy, being on the tech side, but also being in the business interface. And
Yep.
I'm curious to see where the landscape continues to move forward in the citizen developer space. Um, so yeah, I have really no idea. Just as I didn't have any idea where I would be in 2025 as I was sitting there in 2022, or for sure in 2018 when I first opened the spreadsheet. Had I known that this journey was going to be such a fun ride and so unpredictable. So similar to the technology where we struggle to exponentially think about the future. It's for me just continuously learning and growing and keeping that learning mindset is most important. But then also giving back where I can, helping mentor other people and helping inspire whether that be on podcast or guest events for
Which
conferences or any kind of way I can give back to the community to help
Well,
people
you
that are on
well,
their
you've
journey.
done that. You've done that today, Stevie. You're going to help a lot of people who listen to this podcast, and I think that I never got anywhere without other people helping me. So me too. I'm all for that payback. So listen, I want to thank you again, Stevie, for joining us. So to everybody listening to this, if you like these analysis tech podcasts, the lowdown on low code. Um, we love obviously presenting guests who have great stories to tell. We love hearing from you. So if you like us, upvote us. If you don't like us, downvote someone else. But we we really really enjoy having you. So please follow, go back and look at some of the other podcasts. And Stevie, it's been a pleasure, and thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you, Stevie.
Yeah, thanks for having me.